Netflix just gave us the tremendously awesome World War II limited series War Sailor, and now they're bringing another World War II limited series with Transatlantic. This has a very different focus and narrative, but is it going to be worth the watch? Risking their lives to help more than 2,000 refugees escape occupied France, an international gang and their famous charges occupy a villa at the edge of the city, where the threat of mortal danger gives way to unexpected collaborations and intense love affairs. Now, this is a 7-episode limited series that stars Gillian Jacobs, Cory Michael Smith, Yoli Fuller, and Lucas Englander. Now, this is based on true events, but I'm sure there is some dramatic license that's taken to make this more entertaining. Now, I'd never heard about the Emergency Rescue Committee before seeing this series, which is what the group that Jacobs and Smith's characters work for. Now, their job is to try and smuggle refugees out of occupied France and get them to the US, all while evading the French police who are working in cooperation with the Nazis. Now, most of those that are trying to be smuggled are high-profile artists and those with wealth, but included in the mix are a few regular people who happen to just get involved with all the plans. Now, while the content of the show is fairly serious, the overall tone of the show, it's somewhat confused. At times, it wants to be a drama. Other times, it wants to insert comedy, or at least lightheartedness, and then there are some moments that venture into the absurd. Now, I was never quite sure what kind of story this wanted to tell because the mood was constantly shifting, but not in a way that was complementary to the other moods. And I think a lot of it comes down to the acting. I was really not sold on most of the performances. Gillian Jacobs, who I have loved in Community and that horror movie Come Play, here she feels very miscast. I was never convinced that she was some uber-rich, privileged young woman going against her family's wishes to stay in France and help smuggle people out of the country. And Jacobs isn't the only one that falls into this category of not feeling like they're right for the part. Cory Michael Smith plays one of the other main characters, and I couldn't get behind his performance at all. I mean, I did buy that he was mousy and timid at times, but he's also supposed to be this commanding but not overbearing presence, and he just wasn't. Even Corey Stoll, who I like most of his performances, here he was just sort of meh. I mean, he also is supposed to be a person of influence and power, but he was incredibly uninteresting and he lacked charisma to make him stand out. There were really only 2 actors that I felt were cast well and crafted excellent performances. Yoli Fuller and Lucas Englander both were enjoyable to watch, and I actually could believe their characters and their resolve. Fuller plays a concierge at a hotel where many of the refugees are hiding out, and he consistently displayed the appropriate amount of fear, distrust, but also courage for what his character had to do. He was engaging, and he had some wonderful exchanges with various other characters, including a very touching moment with his brother. Now, Englander plays one of the refugees who becomes part of the movement to help others escape. His character feels like he has purpose and drive, like something is actually on the line and being risked by his participation. Now, at one point, his character has a relationship with another character, and the tension that's present, it did get me engaged for a bit, but it also felt like a distraction, almost put in as a complication or maybe even filler to create some tension for the story. Now, the scenery is beautiful to look at, but it's never really used as an element of the story. There's a mansion that comes into play at one point, but to say it contributes as one of the characters, I think would be grossly mistaken. And that's not really a negative. Plenty of shows have great scenery that's not really exploited, but for a show that has a premise of hiding people, to showcase how truly remote and obscure this location was, could have been more highlighted. I was so disappointed by this series. I think the storyline is intriguing, but the show doesn't present it in an engaging or interesting way. Most of the acting feels off, and a lot of that can be either contributing to the confused tone of the show or being a result of it. And a few times, it felt like I was watching a sort of sitcom, but without funny comedy. The mild absurdities, they just didn't make sense for the overall narrative, and the story as a whole lacked a lot of tension, anxiety, or even thrills. The story is built in a way where the characters never felt like they were at risk, regardless if they were fleeing the country or trying to smuggle the refugees. It definitely has potential with the story content, but the execution, it leaves a ton to be desired. And then with 7 episodes, each at about 50 minutes, this is an arduous watch that just left me incredibly dissatisfied. There's sex, maybe some very brief nudity, some profanity, and also some violence. I give Transatlantic 2 out of 5 couches. So are there any historical shows that you've seen that are worth checking out? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.